Hello and welcome to Gravitas Plus. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay and I have a question for you tonight. What is the one thing that all 7.9 billion people in the world are chasing? The one thing that you want in life? Happiness. We all crave it. There was a time when it was a spiritual experience. Today, happiness is an industry worth over $4.2 trillion. Everyone is selling it. Let me show you. In the last 3 years alone, 3.4 million people have enrolled themselves for a Coursera course on happiness. A course on happiness. There are 151 million Instagram posts with hashtag happiness. 1 million with hashtag happiness is a choice. Our fairy tales promise a happily ever after. There is merchandise selling happiness in big, bold letters. Notebook covers remind you to choose happiness. Honestly, who wouldn't like to? But what exactly is happiness and where do we find it? Hindu scriptures say humans can only temporarily secure happiness on earth. This is by pursuing the Purusharthas, or the 4 chief purposes of human life, which are dharma, or religious and moral duty, arth, wealth, kam, conjugal bliss, and moksha, liberation. Permanent happiness, according to Hinduism, is only in the highest heaven. And for that, we must obtain liberation. Islam says happiness is a lifelong process. It includes peace of mind, tranquility of heart, contentment in the world, and everlasting bliss hereafter. The followers of Moses deem happiness as the ultimate goal of man. They say the pursuit of happiness is a moral duty. Pursuit of happiness, by the way, is also enshrined in the US Declaration of Independence. Today, at least 200 universities, including the University of Cambridge, have research institutes dedicated to studying happiness. And yet, happiness remains one of the least understood and subjective terms. A good cup of coffee is happiness. A bout of good weather is happiness. An evening well spent is happiness. A good movie is happiness. The end of lockdown is happiness. It's actually that simple and attainable, and yet it's complicated and seemingly hard to get. So much so that we need books, videos, and podcasts to help us find happiness. Finland is the world's happiest country. People there spend more time in the nature. The Finns love swimming, reading, and eating well. One publication asked people from 17 countries what happiness is to them. A 22-year-old from Greece said happiness is finishing school, getting a stable job, and then getting to retire, be free of work, stress, and health issues. A 20-year-old from Germany said happiness is contentment. A 19-year-old from Iraq said happiness is survival. A 30-year-old from India said happiness is peace and satisfaction. A 16-year-old from the Philippines said happiness is laughter through the toughest of times. You see, happiness is subjective. So is its definition. Mandarin has at least 4 words for happy: Gao Xing, Kai Xin, Xing Fu, and Kuai Lei. In Japan, happiness is linked to the ideas of good luck and social harmony. In the United States, happiness is linked to freedom and personal achievement. But in China, there is a certain aversion to happiness too. It is believed that relentless pursuit of happiness or too much happiness can bring unhappiness. How do you tell if happiness is too much? Can we measure it? We can't. But very often, we pit our levels of happiness against others. We use comparison to measure happiness. But that's not how research works. Scientists working on happiness have developed scales to measure it. The Steen Happiness Index, for example, it includes 20 items. We are expected to read them and select the ones that describe us best. There is the Subjective Happiness Scale, the Happiness Scale by Fordyce, or what is known as the Emotion Questionnaire. And speaking of questionnaires, I have one. Who is responsible for ensuring that we are happy? Is happiness a personal choice, or do governments have a role to play in inducing it? Let's try and answer these. How do we make ourselves happy? I could list out things like hone your hobbies, spend time doing what you love, etc., but you know all of this already. So instead, I will address a myth. A lot of us think that money and travel equals to happiness. Well, we may be wrong. Science says that while we can buy happiness, that happiness is hedonic. Money becomes a big factor in long-term happiness only if you're struggling to make ends meet. And then you happen to come into money. Otherwise, money has very little to do with sustainable happiness. Costa Rica makes for a very interesting case study here. It is far from rich. In fact, if you look at the per capita wealth, Costa Rica has just 1/5 of the wealth of America. Yet it ranks above the US in the latest edition of the Global Happiness Index. It did so the year before too. Costa Rica shows us that government policy can play a big role in inducing happiness. In 1948, the then Costa Rican president, José Figueres Ferrer, abolished the military. That money was diverted to health and education sectors. Today, Costa Rica spends nearly 8% of its GDP on education. The country's top university is funded by the government. Costa Rica is the world's 16th happiest country. The world's happiest country, Finland, was named the world's most literate nation in 2016. Clearly, education can and does play a role in happiness, as do government policies. These are the happiest countries in the world. In many of them, you see, well-being takes a clear policy precedence. New Zealand is number 9 on the list. In 2019, New Zealand released its first ever well-being budget. The idea was to spend on health and well-being of citizens and not concentrate on wealth and economic growth alone. Then there's Canada, 14th on the list. It has one of the most progressive indicators on national well-being. The UK is 17th on the list. 11 years ago, it developed a national well-being program. Nordic countries always feature in the top 10. What do they all have in common? Life satisfaction, social support, freedom to make life choices, and lack of corruption. We cannot talk about happiness and leave out Bhutan. In 1972, King Jigme Singye Wangchuk declared that gross national happiness is more important than gross national product. Till date, Bhutan closely monitors its citizens' happiness as its most precious commodity. Every 5 years, survey takers fan out across the country. 300 questions are asked to some 8,000 randomly selected households. The participants are then compensated for their time with a day's wage. Such progressive and impressive policies. Where is India in the World Happiness Report? It ranks 139 out of 149, way behind Pakistan, Iran, Iraq, Venezuela, Mali, Zambia. This is enough reason for some serious rethinking. You see, it is the duty of the government to ensure well-being of the people and not just create wealth. So what must governments do? Let's turn to the World Happiness Report again. It says there are 6 key ingredients for national happiness: income, life expectancy, social support, freedom, trust, and generosity. You may ask, why must countries facilitate the pursuit of happiness? And I will tell you why. Happiness is closely linked to the well-being of a society. Asocial people, even terrorists, are often traced back to unhappy and disturbed families. A happy worker is a better worker, also 13% more productive. It is no wonder that countries today have ministries dedicated to happiness, loneliness. The Danish government roped in the Happiness Research Institute to improve the quality of people's life, as did the United Arab Emirates and the city of Goyang in South Korea. What's stopping other governments from following suit? Prioritize happiness. Prioritize positivity. It may be a negative word today, but we will be happier embracing the word in the long run. We will also be happier if we cleared a couple of misconceptions. Science says it is not possible for people to be constantly happy. It is only normal to feel sad or angry. It is also unhealthy to seek a happily ever after. Our lives are filled with a whole range of emotions. We wouldn't grow unless we experienced all of them. Happiness is one of the strongest emotions, and it is easier to find than we think. Happiness is finding an answer you have been long looking for. Happiness is perfecting a yoga pose, finding the perfect pair of shoes, a mother's hug, a good song on the radio. Happiness is learning a new language, watching your team win a match. Happiness is finding an old notebook or an age-old photo. Happiness is finishing a lap in record time, a job offer, reaching the last page of a book you've been trying to finish. Happiness is personal. Happiness is unique, and it is out there for everyone.